Okay, so I'm gonna start something that I've been pretty excited to do since Simon left Discmania. And so today we're gonna do the Mindbender versus the Hex. I know it's not his signature one, but it's not here yet, so we'll work on it then. And then a Buzz. And so we'll see how they fly on some big sweeping hyzers, tight hyzers, anti-approach shots. See which ones can handle the torque, and we'll get into that. And don't forget that if you need some new discs, you can always go to the armorydiscgolf.com and you can get yourself some new discs for 10% off, and using code ARMORY10Taylor. So supporting them supports me, helps me out, so let's go check it out. On these first throws, trying to put these discs on hyzer to see how they fly. And so you see quickly with the Buzz, as anyone who throws it would know, it holds its hyzer line really well and then holds it and actually finishes with that fade. Never really has an opportunity to flip up. The Hex, I think it's a bit deceiving. I would say it's a 0-1 because on hyzer I would expect a -1-1 to flip up a bit more, but it still just held that hyzer the whole way and actually still had a very strong fade. And then the Mindbender has a significantly harder time holding such a small hyzer without flipping up, but on significant hyzer and not too hard, it'll hold it. But I've realized that the harder you throw it, the more this disc in particular wants to flip up and push forward. Throwing the MD1, you need to put it on the significant hyzer you're wanting. And then I went into this kind of straight tunnel shot where it's supposed to be an out of bounds all the way along the side, and hoping to have a disc that would flip up straight, not turn over too soon, and not fade out too early. And the Hex, and so when I put it on hyzer, you'll see it kind of leaves the screen for a second, but it finishes with that hyzer, never flipped up like I thought the -1 would make it do, whereas the Mindbender flips up perfectly and then has that nice drift and then finishes really straight. I didn't end up doing the Buzz on that shot, no big deal. And then I did a 330, 340 foot headwind, just straight shot with about a 60 to 70 foot fairway. And with the Buzz, you see that one just handles it effortlessly, not really affected by the wind a whole lot, and then just finishes out left with the stability it has. And the Hex, that one, even with the headwind, gets pushed out into a turn, which is what I'd expect from a disc with those numbers, but you can see the stability as it fights out of that turn and then still finishes with a fade. Whereas the Mindbender, I threw that and then it still just like turned straight over into the ground because the headwind, it has nothing to fight against it with. And so that's what I expected from a disc like the Hex. And then we went into this trying to pump it as far as I could. And so this Buzz, that one was able to handle the most torque, just threw it out there. You see it hold its line for such a long time and then just die out at about 392, 398 I think. The Hex, again, I think that mentally I expect this -1-1 to flip up significantly more than it actually does. And so I put it on hyzer and it just stays on hyzer and then fades out of the camera view. So I think it should be thrown more like a Buzz than more like an MD1 so far. But then the MD1, knowing how it's how it flies at that with these numbers, knowing it's just going to flip up when putting that much torque on it and then carry out with a little bit of a drift. So far, these two are not flying particularly the same at all. Then we went into a few more Anheuser approach shots, and so trying to get around that tree into this window and have it push as far right as possible. And the Hex, like, it has the ability to hold its line and then still have the stability to fight out, which is a really reliable disc for an Anheuser like that. The Mindbender can't be thrown on that same steep of an angle, and so you see that the angle I put it on was about as steep as the Hex and the Buzz, but the Mindbender never wants to come out, and so it really just fights into even a cut roll. And then the Buzz, as again anyone would know, holds it pretty much like the Hex does, comes around and then flexes out really nicely at the end. And I did a longer Anheuser where I'm trying to carry the length of these trees and end as far back as possible. With the Mindbender, this one was the easiest shot for it because I was able to put it on just slight Anheuser. The design of the disc pushed it into its turn and kept it in that angle and then just swung out real nice all the way to the end. So the Hex, being again more stable, and I think the numbers compared to this one suggest, that one I did need a bit more of the angle and therefore still enough room up high when you're putting it on that anhyzer for it to still fight out at the end. And it does. Buzz, same idea. Anytime you throw it wrong, it's most likely just because you didn't commit, or I didn't commit to the angle I was trying to put it on. But at the right angle, the buzz flies like everyone knows it's gonna fly, or at least anyone who's thrown it. And then I went into a big hanging hyzer. I knew the buzz was going to be reliable at this angle to hang it out wide and then have enough stability to fight back, which you'll see. And the hex again, but even here we see that at that angle it just wants to fight and never really wants to come out of its hyzer angle, which is probably really desirable for some people. To me, this is more comparable to an MD3. And then the Mindbender, that one, I put it on a steep hyzer, and you see that it just like, on that angle, it's fine. It pushes out pretty far before going into the fade part of the flight path. So comparably, like the hex is gonna push into its fade a lot sooner than the Mindbender. And so my overall thoughts, especially when it comes to how they feel, is that the Mindbender is the most gummy feeling. You'll see that the edges, like on the rim here, it's a lot more rounded than the hex. And the buzz, which anyone who has thrown a buzz will know that the buzz has a significant drop off compared to the Mindbender, and the hex has a similar drop into more of a flat rim there at the end, whereas the Mindbender's way more rounded off. You can't see it there, where the Mindbender's way more rounded than like cuts into the disc. The hex is not as understable as the -1-1 made it out to be to me. Doesn't make it an unusable disc. It was very usable, but if I were an MVP person, I would replace my MD3 with this hex, not my MD1. And so the MD1 is the straighter, nice softer kind of turn fade disc, whereas the Origin has a bit too much turn, but it has its place. And maybe for those of you who know MVP or Axiom better, you can tell me if maybe that's why the hex is a bit more stable in this plastic. I'm not sure how Simon's new signature disc is going to be compared to that. But these two don't really compare to each other at the moment in their flights. So for me, they hold two different spots. In my bag, this would be my straight shot, this would be my MD3. So you guys let me know a little bit more about the Axiom plastic, and maybe if that's kind of what's making it more stable, and let me know your thoughts on the ones that you've thrown, and see you next time.